there's one thing everyone should know about me, and if you follow my content for long enough you already know this, but it's that I'm a big fan of scary games. I can talk about them for days, and there's a good reason for that. If you look at successful and acclaimed horror titles out there, ranging from indie to AAA, you will find that the majority of these have a common denominator. Silent Hill, Soma, Fears to Fathom, Resident Evil, Slay the Princess. Something these titles share outside of their genre is that they all revolve around stories. And not just any stories, but well-written ones. Even Five Nights at Freddy's has this, a game that's known for its many jump scares, but I'd argue that the reason it succeeded where other jump scare heavy games didn't is because of its lore. FNAF indirectly popularized the concept of making theory videos, taking hidden puzzle pieces and trying to put them all together until the big picture makes itself evident. That was its long-term appeal. Sure, watching YouTubers jump out of their seats was fun for a while, but seeing as many games at the time succeeded with this, that's not what set FNAF apart from the rest. If you ask me, the reason we're still appreciative of any of the aforementioned games is because of the writing. Their stories are what roped us in, what took up so much space in our minds that thoughts of them still echo in there sometimes. And yet, a lot of indie devs look at horror games and think that all it takes for it to be good is a dark environment, a creepy looking monster, and or a jump scare somewhere in there. What a lot of them fail to consider, however, is that horror is one of the hardest genres to get right, more specifically when it comes to creating an engaging and well-paced story. One more thing people should know about me is that I am a writer. I have a degree in writing specifically for the video game medium. I've worked on a few games myself, not all of them great, but I always try to learn from my mistakes, just as everyone can and should. I also think there's much to learn from other people's mistakes. At first I wanted to make a video on why poor writing is so common in indie horror, but it would purely be based on speculation, so instead, let's take a look at some such games and what mistakes are being made. Before we begin, I want to stress that this is not me trying to put down other people's creations or discourage them from trying again. If anything, I want people to keep creating, but as a writer, it can be disheartening to see people not take writing seriously. So this is my way of trying to help people realize that it might be more important than you think. For example, when you start a story-driven game, you probably expect to be told about the situation to some degree. Where you are, why you're there, what you're trying to do. Thankfully, the game Last Guest does this. I stumbled across a playthrough of it on YouTube, and it's a pretty solid example to use for this video for reasons that will soon become apparent. Last Guest starts with a cutscene of the main character in a car, monologuing about how he was visiting some friends but due to work had to drive back earlier than expected. He's tired after driving all day and needs to stop off somewhere to get some rest, which makes sense. He follows some signs to a nearby motel, which is where the gameplay starts. You walk to reception to check in, and unfortunately, this is already when things go downhill writing-wise. Technically, it started in the intro cutscene, but I wanted to give it some grace. Here, you have an odd interaction. The person working reception, who's referred to as a concierge, despite this being a motel and those don't usually have concierges, is very cryptic. This alone isn't bad. Your characters are obviously allowed to have character, but the exchange you have is weird. Not just on the concierge's end, but yours too. When he requests that you sign the logbook, you protest, asking why it's necessary when you just want to sleep. That's usually what motels are for, and that doesn't mean you can skip signing your name for its records. After finally agreeing to sign, you ask what kind of place this is, remarking that it looks like it's not been repaired in 100 years. The concierge ignores this and says, "They arrive, they depart. Not everyone departs." And after you express understandable confusion at this, he tells you the rules of your stay. Do not make any noise after midnight. Do not look out of the windows. Do not open the door if someone knocks. You, again, express confusion, and the concierge simply responds by giving you the key to your room. You tell him that he's scaring you and ask for an explanation. He instead reminds you to sign the logbook, to which you reply, "I understand, I'll sign, but what strange place is this?" The concierge doesn't answer and wishes you a good night. My retelling of this conversation is messy because this conversation is messy. I'm guessing the dev wanted the concierge to say all his cryptic lines, but didn't want it to become too one-sided, so they made the player character ask questions to further the dialogue. Half of what you say is unnecessary, and the same goes for the concierge. The point could have still come across with less words. After leaving the lobby, you talk to yourself about the interaction, essentially recounting what just happened. You mentioned that the concierge was strange and creepy, that he talked like a robot, and that what he said was weird. Us players are already aware of this as we were there for the conversation, and this is just one more thing that could have been said with less words or that didn't need repeating at all. The player character then states they want a shower before bed, so the next objective is laid out to you. You go to your room and make a beeline for the shower, and here, you stop to go on another monologue, this time about how you've made it to the shower, that you're feeling dirty after the long day you just had, and that you're about to take a shower. I don't think I need to explain why this writing doesn't work, but in case the person, or AI, who wrote this is watching, this is a first-person video game with visuals that show you where you are and what you're doing. Players don't need to be told they're by the shower and about to take a shower when they were the ones who walked to the shower for that reason. Anyway, you're about to hop in when you're jump-scared by a mechanic behind you. He doesn't introduce himself or apologize for scaring you. Instead, he says, "I followed you from the hallway." Apparently, the toilet in your room needs to be repaired. You tell him, in way too many words yet again, that he scared you, and that you don't need the toilet and just want to take a shower. That's how I can tell AI wrote this. They don't understand how bladders work. The mechanic insists, and you protest, once again telling him that he scared you. He says he'll return after midnight then, to which you rightly ask him to come back in the morning instead, and again tell him that he scared you. He simply tells you that he's busy in the morning, that he'll be back at midnight, and then leaves. You go on another monologue about how creepy he was, that this motel is weird, and that you're taking a shower. After finally doing it, you go to bed. Not long after, you're awakened by a knock on the door. In case you somehow forgot what happened in the past few seconds, the player character says, "I just went to bed and now there's a knock on the door." You open it and find the concierge outside, and a surprisingly decent conversation ensues. The concierge says, "You were looking out the window. I told you not to look," and then explains that the man in room 8 knows you're here now. He tells you there's a hole in the wall and that this man always looks through it, warning you that he doesn't like noise. He tells you to lock the door and not to open it, and then he runs off. You then go on another rant, to no one in particular, about how the concierge is weird, this place is weird, and then say, "I'm getting out of this godforsaken hole tomorrow, screw it," as if that wasn't always the plan. You then go back to bed, get jump scared by some guy looking through your window, and then fall asleep. After waking up in the morning, you yet again use too many words to say, "I need to pay for my stay and get out of here." Once you've paid, the concierge begins talking about the man in room 8 again, and instead of just leaving, you decide to ask a bunch of follow-up questions. What are you talking about? What neighbor? Are you okay? What is this nonsense? Who's in room 8? Way too many questions coming from someone who's in a rush to leave. You go to your car, but before you hop in, you stop to obviously talk to yourself and say that the concierge is creepy and that it's time to get in the car and get out. When you finally do so, the car won't start. You go back to reception to ask for help, and the concierge tells you to find the mechanic, but warns you to avoid room 8. This leads you to once again ask about room 8 and what's going on at this motel, rehashing the same stuff we've been over a billion times by now. After a conversation that should have been 90% shorter, you head off to find the mechanic. He's in your room repairing the toilet. He too is being cryptic now, also talking about room 8 and the hole in the wall, to which you once again start asking questions like, "What is going on? What are you talking about? What's wrong with this place?" As usual, without getting any actual answers. When he finally takes a look at your car, he tells you it'll take a day or two to get repaired as the engine is busted, so you have no choice but to stay longer. You're hungry, so you go to reception and ask for food. Conveniently, the concierge finds a burger behind the counter and gives it to you. You ask if it's beef, and he says yes, it's a beef burger. You can sit by the table in the lobby to eat it, and so you do. I'm trying really hard to figure out how to explain why this whole exchange is weird, because I feel like anyone who hears this would immediately just understand that it is, but this is meant to be a constructive video, so I have to try somehow. First of all, you don't just randomly have burgers behind counters. This makes no sense. The concierge could have offered to order something for you and have the burger be delivered off screen. Or he could have even said, "This is my lunch, but you can have it." Second, the detail of it specifically being a beef burger is unnecessary, even after what happened happens next. You eat the burger, express that the meat tastes weird and that it made you feel sick. It was unnecessary for that part of the conversation to happen. The remark about the meat being weird would have had the exact same impact and connotation without you asking if it contained beef. It's just following the same formula the game has had so far throughout of containing too much information. After finishing the burger, you say to yourself that you have nothing else to do, so you're just gonna sit in the same spot and wait until evening when you can sleep. So you do. It fades to nighttime, and once again you talk to yourself, this time saying, well, it's evening, time to go to bed. You walk to your room, but then find yourself thinking about what the concierge said about a hole in the wall. Curiosity gets the better of you, despite the staff's many, and I mean many, warnings. So you move the painting behind your bed to see if you can find said hole, and you do. You decide to look through it, and what you see on the other side would be horrifying if it wasn't so goofy. There's a man hovering over a dead body, stabbing it over and over and over again, blood spurting everywhere. You comment on what you're seeing, saying, damn, someone's being killed. Is this serious? We need to call the police urgently. It's clearly not that urgent though, as you insist on hanging the picture back on the wall before making your call. Once you finally get to it, it seems the phone isn't working. You monologue about how you saw someone get killed and that your heart is pounding so much you can't just sit and wait. So what do? Do you try to call again? Find the concierge? Go to one of the houses across the road, or just go to sleep. You take a few breaths and think, well, there's nothing else you can do, so you might as well just lock the door and go to bed, praying that you won't be the next victim, because of course that's what you do. You wake up the next morning, expressing relief that you woke up alive. Then you finally decide to go find the concierge to tell him what you witnessed and to contact the police. Instead of reacting with shock and horror, he berates you for looking through the hole despite his warnings. You tell him it doesn't matter and that he needs to call the police, to which he responds, the police won't come. The phone is silent. It's always silent. You try to urge him to do something, but instead he simply tells you that the killer knows what you saw and that you'll be unable to leave. You accuse him of being in cahoots with the killer, and he responds with the warnings from earlier. Lock the door, don't go near the wall, and don't make any noise. Fed up, you tell him you refuse to wait around and risk being killed, to which he replies that you can take your car and leave if you want, but the man from Room 8 will find you. You track down the mechanic and tell him you need your car, but apparently it won't be ready until later in the evening. You stress that you need it done faster, but there's no way it'll be any faster than it already is, so you decide to listen to the mechanic and wait until sundown. Right there in the exact same spot where you just had a conversation with the guy. You don't even go to your room. You only go back there when it's already nighttime and the mechanic still hasn't showed up, telling yourself there's nothing else you can do. When you enter, you notice that the picture that was covering the hole is missing. You decide to take another peek through, and on the other side is the concierge, hanging from the ceiling. Then, the killer appears, staring right back at you from the other side of the hole. A few moments later, you hear a knock on the door. Despite it not being a smart thing to do at all, you open up, and standing outside is the mechanic. In case you forgot, he introduces himself with, "It's me, the mechanic." He's come to tell you that the car is fixed and ready. Relieved, you tell him that he should get out of here as well, to which he agrees. You both begin to walk off, when suddenly, he pulls out a gun and shoots himself. For once, you have nothing to say. You get to the car and finally drive off. In an ending cutscene, you talk about how the car is now running and that you never want to see that motel or the concierge ever again. The latter being especially strange to say considering you saw his dead body. You think about what you witnessed and how you'll never be able to forget it. When the man from Room 8 appears in the back seat. And then, Last Guest ends. Just as with the game itself, there's so much to say and at the same time so little. Outside of all the repetitive dialogue that's just there as fluff to make the experience longer, there's not much to it. You're warned about someone, you witness them doing something terrible, you wait around a little, and then leave. You're never in any actual danger as the killer doesn't come after you until the very end. And that's just in a cutscene that comes to a close as quickly as it began. There was never anything present to make players feel unsettled, and not from a lack of trying. In fact, they almost tried a bit too hard. Show, don't tell is a very common guideline in writing where instead of explicitly describing what's going on, it's implied in other ways. This game does the opposite. Whenever something happens, the main character recaps what they witnessed and how it made them feel, despite this not being necessary at all since us players were there to see it ourselves. Saying that the concierge is acting strange when we can already tell from the way he speaks, repeatedly stating that the mechanics startled the main character when we were on the receiving end of that very jump scare. It's like the dev doesn't trust the players to understand what's going on, at the same time as they don't trust themselves to properly convey the feelings they want, so they have to tell you how you're supposed to react. There's also an issue with things being inconsistent, such as the geography mentioned during the intro cutscene not making any sense, and the main character talking about being covered in dust from the road despite driving a car in the rain. The least you can do is make sure your writing aligns with itself. Granted, I don't think this particular game would have been fully saved with a better story, as the gameplay leaves much to be desired, and the visuals aren't particularly atmospheric, but sometimes even that is not enough to save a game that's lacking in storytelling. We can look at the game Zooparasite for this. It opens with the following text. From the depths of the sewers, insects emerge transformed, their bodies swollen and twisted by toxins, chemicals that we formed. The game then starts, and you find yourself by said sewers, with a voice speaking to you through a radio, referring to you as Personnel 7. The man on the other end says they can't get in touch with Team 3, so it's all up to you now. Your task is to find all the toxic chemicals in the area and bring them back to the exit. The man on the radio then mentions reception is bad down in the sewers, so you won't be able to communicate, which is funny because if such is the case, why is he surprised about losing contact with Team 3? And then tells you to be careful as he doesn't know what to expect down there. And with that, you're on your way. The first thing you see as you come down the stairs leading deeper into the sewers is a dead body inside a hazmat suit, presumably one of your colleagues, someone from Team 3, next to a glow stick that will help you navigate the dark. Here, your objective is made clear to you. You need to find and collect 8 chemical canisters in order to avoid any spread of the infection they apparently cause. You see signs of this infection throughout the game as you avoid giant insects that serve as the main obstacle between you and your objective. After just a minute or two of exploring, you come across another dead body, this time next to a note. Notes can be kinda hit or miss in games. They can make sense in the setting and situation during which you find them, and they can work well as a way to further a story, but sometimes they're just there to info dump and there's no reasonable explanation for the note or its contents to exist. In my opinion, this note is an example of the latter. It's written by someone part of a chemical waste removal team that also came down to collect the canisters. Reading it, we find out that the same team disposed of these very chemicals in the sewers to begin with, so they're here to correct an old mistake. Then this person writes about what they've seen. Insects growing abnormally large, some even merging with each other. They mention that these cans need to be removed before it's too late, and that if anyone has any trouble getting back, they should follow the exit signs on the walls, as those will lead to the exit. Yeah, that's what exit signs are usually for. The problem I have with this note is the fact that it reads like a journal entry from someone who is presumably on duty down here trying to complete their task without getting killed. When would they have had time to sit down and write a whole page about what they've witnessed and what caused it? Why do they feel the need to explain that exit signs lead to the exit? Of course, this is information that they want the player to know, and it's fair that this is the story they want to tell, but the way it's told doesn't make much sense. And this is a pretty common mistake people seem to make with notes. I assume the implication is that this person wrote the note either while dying or while worried about their impending death, as it was found right next to their body. But if such is the case, it should have been a lot more concise and maybe even somewhat erratic. Once you've read the note, you traverse deeper into the sewers, looking for the cans while avoiding the giant insects, when all of a sudden, a vision of your dead colleagues in hazmat suits pops up right in front of you, their voices urging you to turn back. And then, well, that's it. Nothing else really happens in the game until the end, story-wise or gameplay-wise. As far as I know, at least, you find no more notes nor anything else that may give you insight into the story. You just avoid some bugs, you repeatedly get jump-scared by your colleagues that tell you to leave without you really knowing why, and you collect all the cans. Once you have collected them all, however, you return to the exit to get back in touch with the man on the radio. He praises you for your good work. and then command someone to release the gas. The sewers then fill up with this gas, and the man explains it's too risky to let you come back out as you could be one of them. He mentions that some of the creatures down in the sewers apparently have human traces within them, and then says that you will understand soon enough, before laughing maniacally. He continues his bad guy monologue, thanking you for bringing back the chemicals when the others didn't seem too keen on doing so. He then says, "Goodbye, old friend," which doesn't make sense as you're clearly an employee and not a friend. He's not even referred to you as anything else but Personnel 7 this entire time. In the next breath, the man then presumably speaks to someone next to him, referring to you as Test Subject 7 instead, requesting that your body be brought back for further studies. The end. The sad thing is, this game has potential. The overall concept isn't bad, the environment would have worked for atmospheric horror, but none of that actually comes through well in the game, and a big part of it is the lack of solid storytelling. An easy way to pace the writing would have been to take the information you get from the one note you find in the game and split it into several smaller ones, place them in various locations of the sewers, and have the player puzzle everything together slowly but surely. This would have helped a little bit with building suspense as well, though it would certainly require more work than that to realize its full potential. These smaller notes would have also made more sense in-game. They could be hasty scribbles found in hiding places throughout the sewers, the implication being that they served as a way for a terrified employee to let off some steam before heading back out to collect cans. Aside from that, the lines from the radio man could have of course been rewritten too, especially the last monologue. Some of the info he shares could have been worked into the aforementioned sewer notes, such as the detail of creatures having human traces. Saying you'll understand soon enough right before killing the character you're talking to sure is a choice. There's not much to be understood when you're dead. The crazy laugh is also very out of place, and it's like they added some stereotypical villain lines just to make it clear he's actually a bad guy. We already understand this, given the fact that he's in the process of murdering us, so you know. What I'm getting at is that good writing is not just about a game's overall story, it's also about how it's communicated to players. Be it a story about a killer in the motel room next to yours, or a story about mutated bugs emerging from the darkness of the sewers. Having an interesting idea means nothing if you don't convey it in a way that is exciting and fun, or rather, as horror games tend to be, unnerving and full of tension. It's about finding that sweet spot between too much and too little, about giving explicit information only when necessary, and learning how to be vague when the situation calls for it. It's a balancing act that not everyone knows how to pull off. Not every horror game needs an intricate story. For example, look at Phasmophobia and how its appeal lies elsewhere. But if you're making a game that's driven by a story, there needs to be some amount of effort. I think it's especially important to look at this sort of thing now that more and more people are relying on AI to be creative for them. Writing not being taken seriously or into consideration at all has been a problem since long before AI though, but the existence of AI makes it easier for these kinds of devs to avoid evolving when that's something we should all strive to do. I don't expect people to pump out masterpiece after masterpiece. We all start out kind of bad before we get good at something, and that's okay. But you have to be willing to learn and put in the effort to improve, especially if you're asking people to pay for your product. To get better at something, we need to keep doing it, so please continue making things and you'll inevitably grow, like a mutated insect in a sewer. Thank you for watching.